I'm Tom Willits, and I'll be offering the structure for the structured conversation tonight. Before we get started, I'm going to read the resolution that will be on the November ballot out loud. So here it goes. Should the state legislature enact proposed legislation that closes the dark stores loopholes, which currently allow commercial retail properties to significantly reduce the assessed valuation and property tax of such properties by using closed, vacant, dark properties as comparable properties for determining the assessed value of open, occupied, and fully operational properties, resulting in a substantial shift in taxes levied against other tax-paying entities, such as the residential homeowners and/or cuts in essential services provided by an affected municipality. That's a question. So, affected municipality? And that's what we're going to be talking about for the next about 45 minutes. And we're going to determine who presents which side first by a coin toss. And Mark, since you're closer, I'll ask you to call it in the air. Okay.
It's Eisenhower, so I like that. Heads. So, what is that?
It's heads. I didn't hear what you said, so.
I like it. I said I like it.
In that case, you get to go first. So Mark will have 15 minutes to present the side of the argument in favor of the resolution or of the referendum. John Doemel will have 15 minutes to present the opposing side, and then each will be given five minutes to have rebuttal, and then following that we'll open it up for questions from the audience.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for everybody for coming out tonight. Hopefully this will enlighten you a little bit in terms of what the issue is, because it's a very complex issue and want to try to make sure that everyone understands it, and we're pleased that Oshkosh Media is taping this so we can share this with the public. At the City of Oshkosh, the Council has taken a pretty strong stand on addressing what are really two separate issues: WALGREENS decision from the Supreme Court, as well as the Dark Store issue. And they're really both relevant, but let me just talk about, start with my presentation with, are these comparable properties? And for those of you not familiar with it, the first one is the old Kmart store, and the second one is a current Lowe's store. Both of these are locations right here in Oshkosh. There are two terms that are involved in what I consider and what the Council considers a tax shift. Shifting the burden of property taxes from some large retail businesses to smaller businesses and homeowners. And there's really two issues there. It's the WALGREENS case and then the Dark Store issue, which is the wording in the referendum is really more related to the Dark Store issue. But both are related to property assessments, but they're different, but they're really along the same topic. The WALGREENS case has to do with case involving the city of Madison as well as WALGREENS. And you're going to hear me talk about a lot of different stores. And let me state and disclose right at the start, I shop at WALGREENS, I shop at Lowe's, I shop at Menards, I shop at Best Buy, as I'm sure many of you do. So this isn't about being anti any store. I get a lot of pizza at Zeroni's as well. John and I know each other very well on a business as well as personal basis, but we all shop at these locations. This isn't about those locations, but the WALGREENS case is what really brought it about. And WALGREENS in 2008 claimed that their properties were overvalued, and they were being assessed by the city of Madison for a sales price. So an arm's length is what it's called, an arm's length transaction in the open market. They argued that the lease they had, because of the way they structured their real estate, that their property was overvalued, even though the property value that the city of Madison used was identical to the price that it had sold for recently. The Supreme Court ruled in WALGREENS' favor, however, and that created a conflict between the court decision and what assessors at the local level have been directed by the State Department of Revenue to conduct assessing properties. And I can talk a little bit about that. Properties are assessed according to the manual set by the state by three methods. The sales method, what did it sell for? The cost of construction, what did it cost to build? As well as finally, the lease revenue or the income approach. And that's based on how much revenue that a property generates that's used for retail as well as commercial real estate, whether it's an office building or even apartment buildings. Since the Walgreens decision took place, many other cities were subjected to lawsuits, including the city of Oshkosh, as well as our neighbors to the north, Appleton. We were both challenged. The city of Oshkosh was challenged by Walgreens, and CVS challenged the city of Appleton. Other cities, once those decisions were made, they had to follow that court decision, even though it created that conflict for assessors. What method do we use? Do we listen to the Supreme Court decision, or do we follow the manual? The assessors asked, what changes are you making to the manual as a result of the Walgreens decision? And the state, in my opinion, chickened out and said, well, we're not changing our manual. Well, what does that mean? They didn't really help assessors. So we were very conflicted in how we were going to do that. And frankly, it created a cottage industry, because now attorneys have been suing municipality after municipality, regardless of what the decision from the assessors were, that they were overvalued. And essentially what they're doing is they're bypassing a citizens board of review. Now, I'm not sure how many of you have ever challenged your assessment. Everyone is entitled to challenge their assessment, and they go to it's a citizens board of review. The council appoints these people, and they're the ones who hear the case, hear the evaluation methodology of the assessor, as well as hear from the property owner or their representative. And the board of review can make an adjustment to their assessments if they feel that there's something that was missing from it. But now, because of these lawsuits, we really have a cottage industry of attorneys suing the cities, and so essentially these property values are being negotiated outside of the normal process that has been established by state law that says the Board of Review should do this, because everybody says, well, I'm just going to go to court and I'm going to sue you and we're going to negotiate. This is an example straight from Oshkosh, because you've probably heard a lot about different examples in different communities, but I felt it was appropriate to give you a local example. In 2009, the 9th Avenue, 9th and Keller Walgreens store sold for $3.65 million. And Walgreens used the argument from the Madison decision that their property should be valued at 2.07, a 43% reduction. And it was actually, that was what we settled on. They were actually arguing that their value should be about $1.6 million. So that was straight from the lawsuit that they filed. We lost that case, and so there was a 43% reduction. The court settled on the 2.07 million. So we ended up refunding them $69,000 as a result of that decision. And you have to realize that even though the city assesses and the city collects the taxes, we're really just the paying agent on behalf of everybody. So that $187,000 came from all taxing jurisdictions, including the school district, Winnebago County, Fox Valley Technical College. So that 187, after we paid back the 69, the remainder came from the other taxing jurisdictions. So this is not just a city issue. So that shift really goes to other people who are paying it, and it's other businesses, small businesses, as well as residents who don't have the ability to have these assessments reduced. Those amounts are increasing because even though there may not be a lawsuit involved, we have to follow the court case from the Madison versus Walgreens case. So we have to reduce those values. Before I finish, the property taxes, when you pay them, it's really a function of the assessment, the assessed value of the properties. So think of one large pie that you have, and your assessment is really your designated slice of the property tax pie. That when the council decides what the overall tax will be, we use that methodology to say how much are you and you and you going to pay. When that shift happens and the slice of the pie for a Walgreens or one of those stores drops, their slice gets smaller, somebody's gets larger. It doesn't go away. The pie stays the same because the council has said we're going to collect $35 million is what the city collects. That $35 million has to get divided. So it gets redivided to other properties. So that's essentially what happens. That shift goes to other properties. and it's primarily residents and small businesses. So then there's the dark store issue. That has started in other states. This is not initiated in Wisconsin by any stretch of the imagination. It's just now coming to Wisconsin. And it's been very popular in Michigan and Indiana, but they argue, as it said earlier in the referendum language, that the value of a new store should be based on the value of other current vacant stores. The logic is nobody else will buy our store, so it should be valued on essentially its future value. The new stores, the argument, new stores are going to be vacant, so that should be their current value. The reality is there's a big difference between the two stores I showed you earlier. And as a case in point, just last year, we took the 3 largest stores and their police calls and compared it with 3 vacant stores. There were 700 police calls at the 3 big box stores and 4 calls to those other stores. So there can be really no comparison when you're talking about the demands for services that are provided there. A dark store example in Oshkosh, there's been a lot of arguments that this is not happening in Wisconsin. It is happening not only in Wisconsin, but it's happening here. Lowe's has been seeking a reduction similar to Walgreens, but there's a little twist that they've put on that, and they're using the former Kmart site. So that wasn't just an extreme example, that was an exact example. And for those of you who remember the old American TV store, and I'm not talking about the one that was in the town of Grand Chute where I used to work, it's the one that existed in the former town of Menasha 25 years ago. It's now a Pitney Bowes call center. They are using that as the sample property. Those 2 properties were 2 of the 3 they used. They were seeking a reduction of nearly 50%. Now, you may say, fight them on this is wrong, but the reality is they have the backing of the Walgreens decision in their favor. So we ultimately had to negotiate that. We settled the value for actually the next few years, but it's a significant reduction. It's probably about I'm going to say about a 35 to 40% reduction over what it was. They were trying to get 50%. We got it about 36. But we know that they're going to other municipalities using a similar argument to get their value down to roughly half of what they are. And eventually that's going to happen without reform. They will be back. We've done refunds to Walgreens, CVS, Lowe's, Menards, from all the taxing jurisdictions. As I said, this is not just about the cities. After the refund, that's a one-time reduction for us that we had to pay that, but afterwards the pie gets reset. And so we are all paying the difference. Now, are we paying the exact $69,000 individually? No. We're sharing that $69,000 because that has to get recollected. The city is under levy limits, and so we can raise so much every year, and that's it. So we take that roughly $35 million and we slice the pie. So that's really what's happening here. The result is really a shift of taxes from the chain stores and other big box retailers to residential and small businesses. Residential properties in Wisconsin already pay 68% of the tax bill, of the property tax bill. Compared to Minnesota, residential is just 50%. Now, I'll go off topic a little bit. This is a problem in Wisconsin. This is more than just the dark store issue, and you can't blame the dark store issue on all this. We are overly reliant on property taxes. But the reality is that the shift is getting worse, and we're already paying over 2/3 of the property tax bill. This is going to make our share even larger. And the projection is that it could be as much as an 8% increase. So that could take us up to 3/4 or even worse. Why can't the law be changed? The answer is that it can be. Oshkosh and other communities have been working to change the law, and the lobbying effort has effectively failed. The League of Wisconsin Municipalities represents cities throughout the state. The Wisconsin Towns Association, the Counties Association, other groups have worked together, and we had 63% of the legislature, 84 out of 132 legislators, not only said they sponsored the bill, not just said they'd vote for it, they sponsored the bill. And usually when you're signing on, that means you feel very strongly about that bill. Majority's prepared to vote in favor of reform. At least 63% of them are. And all 3 local legislators have gone on record as being in support. So we appreciate that. But this has been stalled by Speaker Voss. He refused to put it up for a vote on the Assembly floor, knowing full well that there's a majority in both houses. The cities and counties, I think, have responded, and I see a couple of our county board members are here. They're the ones who just said, we need to put this on the ballot. I can tell you that in the city of West Dallas, they put this similarly worded information on a ballot, and it received 91% support from the voters. And that was during a primary, which you really don't get a lot of participation during those. The county is doing it in this case, I think, to just get a broader issue, because even though we're just talking about the city of Oshkosh, when that shift occurs, the shift of county taxes changes, and the shift of school district taxes change, and that impacts people outside the city of Oshkosh and people throughout Winnebago County. So this is not just an issue for the city. But cities and counties are all asking for their voices to be heard. Go to that website. There's a great, that's my last slide. There's a great whiteboard video, about 4.5 minutes long. And I encourage you to take a look at that, darkstoreloopholes.org. And thank you.
And now I am, And now it's John Doemel's turn to present the other side of this debate. No, the other side of this structured conversation.
Hello, everybody. How are you? First of all, I'd like to say that I really appreciate everybody being here and inviting me here, and Oshkosh Community Media and the library for having events like this. I think that's a huge thing, and we need definitely more of it. That being said, I'd like to say that this started with a coin toss, 50-50 flip. Both sides of that coin were even. Both sides of this coin are not even. It is a foregone conclusion. We're going to lose this as a referendum. The way it's worded, 93%, I think that's low. It should be 100% if it's worded exactly like this. Argument that I'm going to have is there is no loophole to be closed, dark store to be closed. The way I see it is property should be valued and assessed as property. A brick should be a brick. Square foot should be a square foot. Now, there are ways to make a brick more expensive, and I agree with that 100%. A brick next to a railroad track is not worth a brick next to the water. We all agree that that's worth more. There's different ways to raise property tax, in my opinion. Right now, with all the natural disasters we've had in the United States, building materials are through the roof. You know, if they would have said that we want to charge Lowe's more because bricks are worth more and drywall's worth more, absolutely, I have no problem with that. The problem that I have is that we've been using a lease as property tax, and that's scary to me. It's scary to me because what a business does should have no effect on a property's brick value. We've heard over and over again that Lowe's is comparing themselves to the Kmart property, where Lowe's paid, let's see here, they paid $239,000 in property taxes last year. The Kmart building paid $48,000, so I don't see how that's a comparable. Now, it's sad when we say that, yes, we gave Lowe's $130,000 back. I get it. Like, it would make me mad too, and I don't blame Mark. I don't think the city's the bad guys on this. I don't think the assessors are the bad guys. I think they're doing their jobs trying to get the most amount of assessment off of these properties as they can. I mean, that's what we elect you to do. We elect you to make sure that our numbers are good. We elect you to make sure that you're collecting the most that you can. And the reason that they're losing in the state Supreme Court level is because a lease value is not property. See, in a lease, as far as I'll go, I'll use my own store as a reference here. I couldn't afford the booths when I moved from Murdoch to the old rail building because I didn't want them to bulldoze that. That would have been a shame, so I jumped in to save that building. It's part of history in Oshkosh. But my landlord paid for all my booths and my lighting fixtures. That price got built into my lease. That's not property, that's personal property, and I paid taxes on that separately. There's a bakery that wants to go downtown. Well, the landlords want to buy all their equipment and build that into the lease. There's also property taxes built into the lease. So to use a lease to regulate what you assess a property's value on is a slippery slope to me personally. The other thing that scares me is that tax code and when you have property tax assessment, it's uniform. There's a uniformity clause. So whatever we do to businesses, we also allow to do to residential. Now, I couldn't afford my house. I had to take out a loan. Imagine if the city came to me and said, hey, you know, your mortgage value is worth $230,000, but your house is only $150,000. Well, that wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be right to charge me off of my mortgage value on the property of my home. Now, I trust this council to not do that. But if we do this, that's a possibility. And you always have to remember the power of a pen. Whatever power you put into a pen, you give to the next guy that holds it, to the next people that are elected. Look what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. I bet everybody wishes the pen was a little less powerful, perhaps. So we have to be careful of what we do and how we go forward on this. Now, there's other aspects to a business that aren't personal property tax or that aren't property tax. There's personal property tax. Lowe's paid an additional $26,000 in personal property tax on top of their assessment last year. That's for all the forklifts and the computers. That's already makes a difference if you're vacant or not. They pay an income tax in that lease that's usually favorable. Starbucks across the nation are, well, even here in Oshkosh, are paying $25 a square foot. It doesn't make my building worth $25 a square foot. WALGREENS got a refund. Yeah, absolutely, they sued. But go ahead, go on the website and look at their assessments over the years and the amount that they paid in. 2007, they went from $38,000 to $62,000 in a year, jump. 2011 and 2012 went from about 68 to 82. That's a big jump. Go ahead, go on there and look on them. And then we say that we're looking for small businesses and we don't want to hit small businesses. Well, that's already happening. It's a nice restaurant across from Lourdes. They got built for $550,000, got assessed at $750,000. And they fought it. They did what Mark said. They came down to City Hall and said, if you think that's what it's worth, cut me a check. It's yours. Of course, they didn't cut them a check. They agreed, and they lowered the assessment. So we just have to make sure that we're charging a brick as a brick and mortar as mortar. And I agree that there probably is something that needs to be changed. And for me, it would be to stop using lease as a form of an assessment of property tax. Because I don't know about you, but I don't think the Kmart building should get a break just because they're vacant. I don't think they are. I think the only reason they paid $48,000 last year is because it's been run down. It makes a difference. The roof probably leaks now, and we don't want to see that. And I agree with the pie, Mark's pie. And yes, if the business comes down, it makes our share get bigger. Levies on budgets and caps are a thing. But you want to know what increases that? New growth. New growth. Now, as upset as I can be that Lowe's got a $130,000 settlement from them, they still paid $2.6 million into our great city. That's a lot of money. And I would like a Home Depot as well. Heck, I'll give them another $130,000 to give us another $2.6 million to grow our schools and fix our roads. Those are things that need to be done. And again, the city is not the enemy on this. The county board is not the enemy on this. They're trying to do the best job they can to make sure that they raise the revenue and take care of us as citizens and provide services. And the services to me, I mean, I'm shocked that we had to do 4 calls to a vacant building. That tells you it's the people, it's not the business. That's terrible. I'm sure Walmart gets a lot of calls on shoplifting. I mean, that's a human condition. That's not Walmart's fault. And I do shop at WALGREENS and Lowe's as well, and I appreciate it. And I also appreciate the citizens, and I appreciate the fact that you guys are looking out for them. But the way that this is written, I mean, I'd like you all to look at this referendum. There's no way that's losing. There's no way that's losing. You know, and whatever happens in the future and what we do and how we assess this and how we address it, I just wish it was a coin flip, because this is a 20-sided dice, and only one number wins for me, and that might be a little bit off there. So I don't have 15 minutes, and I don't have a PowerPoint presentation because I just wanted to come speak from the heart, because that's normally what I do. But I do appreciate everybody here, and Mark, I appreciate you being here, and I guess I'll let you do your rebuttal.
The rules said they gave us 5 minutes for rebuttal, and I don't know if that necessarily is really necessary. You know, John's talked about a couple of things, but I would probably just in rebuttal repeat a lot of the stuff I already said. So, you know, the legislature, the wording, I will acknowledge, I think is biased on its surface. But I think it just shows the frustration that's going on. It did get majority support in the legislature, and it wasn't worded that way. It was worded differently. And but I agree with John that the wording could have been a little different. But I think it just represents some of the frustration everybody has. The council doesn't set the values. It's really the assessor's manual. And John's point about the trickiest of the three methods is the income approach. It's absolutely the trickiest. There's a lot of things that if you want a degree in municipal assessing, I could bore you tonight with that, but it really is about what's called a capitalization rate, and bankers use it to try to figure out what the value is. Our point has been that the WALGREENS value was supported by all three methods, not just the income method. It may be some cases where the income method and the cost method and the sales method are different, and maybe there needs to be some reconciliation of that. John and I have known each other for a number of years. We can sit and disagree. I know he's wrong, so it's okay. But we disagreed, and we've discussed this a lot, and there does need to be some reform. But this has to be fixed, and that's kind of where I'm at on this. And I'd be happy to listen to questions. But John has a 5-minute rebuttal, so go for it.
John, before you go, and you'll get your full 5 minutes, and you yielded the balance of your time to, I don't know what you yielded to, but thank you. But while John is speaking, if you would write down your questions, that would be really helpful. And then give them to Sandy. Sandy will bring them to me, and the conversation will continue.
I talk long enough for everybody to have questions.
Yeah, that's fine for me. I respect Mark too. As a matter of fact, we agreed just before this that was definitely not a roughing the passer penalty on Clay Matthews. So there is that. We do have that in common. However, you know, the sales method that they use with WALGREENS, and a lot of things I've been comparing this to a Cadillac that Elvis drove. Now, if Elvis drives a Cadillac, it makes that Cadillac worth more, right? Somebody's probably going to pay you $300,000 for that Cadillac. Does not make the Blue Book value of a Cadillac move an inch. It doesn't. A WALGREENS is going to sell for $6 million because it has a 25-year lease. Those people aren't just buying the building, they're buying the tenant. And the tenant should not be part of property. And that's not the city's fault. I mean, they have told them, yep, you can use this as property. And then it gets to the Supreme Court level, and then they lose, saying you can't use it on property. So there's a mix-up. It's not on the city for that. That is why they're losing in the Supreme Court cases that are happening. And I just caution that any kind of changes that we're going to do to the Constitution of Wisconsin to allow us to actually be able to assess property tax, tenant tax as a property, that's going to hurt. And just remember, it's uniform. So whatever they do to business, they can eventually do to residentials. Now, on top of the Cadillac, if you will, there is money to be made as the income level on businesses. And I can understand the frustration of the city. They don't get that. They don't get the income tax that these people are making off the leases. They don't get that. And I can understand the frustration. But just because Elvis owns a Cadillac doesn't make the Cadillac worth more in steel or tires or a carburetor. It makes the heartstrings value go up, maybe the worth. That doesn't mean the value of it's there. And that's all I'm looking for. I'm looking for Lowe's to be assessed as bricks and mortar. I'm looking for property tax to just be land plus property and building. to be the debate. And again, I want to say that I don't fault the city or the county for trying to change that. I mean, I think they're being good stewards by doing that. I just, like I said, I'm worried about the consequences, that if we change this at a state level, that eventually we'll be able to come after your mortgage value to assess your house higher, because the same argument is, it makes sense that way. So just be careful.
Thank you, John. We have a few questions. So far, 3 have been submitted, and we hope there'll be others. First, I think this is just a fact question for you, Mark. The Walgreens decision at the Supreme Court level, was that the federal Supreme Court?
No, that was the state, that was the Wisconsin Supreme Court. There's so many different rules state or nationwide on how properties are assessed. How it's done in Wisconsin is totally different than other states, including the ones that the Dark Store has already taken root. So this is all just local level. I don't anticipate this ever going to the federal Supreme Court.
Okay, thank you. Next question, and I think this is one that you'll both want to weigh in on. What is the appropriate way to assess that follows Supreme Court guidelines?
You want me to, I mean, it kind of goes.
I make
that's the
pizzas for a
dilemma.
living.
That's the dilemma, because what they argued was that they accepted Walgreens' methodology, which did not use any of the 3 methods that's been prescribed in the state assessor's manual. Our assessors still have to follow the state assessor's manual, and that's kind of the problem. And you know, in Wauwatosa, for example, I believe it was Lowe's in that case, could have been a Home Depot, one of the 2. They argued that after the lease was signed, that not only the property, the real estate or the buildings went down, but they also argued that the value of the land should go down from $9 million to $3 million. So those types of things, like how do you justify those things? That's the tough part that we still struggle with. So I don't know if it really effectively gave us that direction. Lowe's, when they were negotiating with us, they wanted a certain square foot value. That was what they wanted, and they ended up getting a roughly $45 to $48 a square foot value. They wanted 34. They started at 58, so they're just trying to whittle it down. I don't know if there's any true answer to that, but you can see that it's just trying to whittle away as it goes on.
Yeah, the Lowe's compromise, I think, was a fair compromise, and I think both sides did a good job of coming to the middle on that. I'm aware of the story he's talking about in Wauwatosa, was it, right?
Tosa, yeah.
Yeah, and there are cases of bad businesses out there, absolutely. I think that argument that they have is no merit. I mean, they bought the land. The land should be worth the land. What you paid for the land, just because you build a big building on it, doesn't make it worth less. So I'm with you on that 100%. I also think that the problem isn't within the state. The problem is exactly how the state told the assessors they can handle their business without checking with the Supreme Court. If you say that, yeah, you guys can assess a building this way, but it doesn't line up with the Constitution of the state of Wisconsin, well, they set these guys up to fail. And that's why I say that, yeah, we should change something with how they're assessing buildings, but we should do it in a just, in a fair way, and we should base it off of land and building structure. So clearly, you know, how they're telling the state assessors that they can assess land and how the Constitution of Wisconsin is set up and how we're judging these cases, they're clearly off. And how does it get that far off? I don't know. How do they, Mark, I need you to do your job like this, and when you do your job like this, nope.
We'll tell you did it wrong.
So, yeah, right, yeah. So it's confusing. I mean, I think it's a great question. I think that's the, the question is appropriate, and it's the solution is the tricky part. And that's why the only reason that I'm really scared of this whole thing is because tax is uniform. Property tax is uniform in the state of Wisconsin. So.
All right, thank you. Here's a question that you can both take a crack at. Why is Speaker Voss able to hold up the vote? I'll just refresh your memory. I think it was in your PowerPoint, Mark, that
no, it was in John's PowerPoint.
Oh, and my memory is awful. Okay. But 68% of the legislators in Wisconsin were sponsors, not just supporters, but sponsors of the bill, and it never came up to a vote. So why does Speaker Voss have that kind of power?
That's a poli-sci question more than
anything. Yeah, it is, yeah.
I mean, the legislator, the Speaker of the Assembly can decide whether something goes for a vote, and he chose not to schedule it for a floor vote. What I was told was that each house, regardless of Democratic, Republican, whatever, they don't like to bring something forward unless they get a majority within their own party, their own caucus. And that seems to be a pretty high standard. That means you want to have your votes lined up so that you don't have to rely on the other side of the aisle. To me, that goes against bipartisanship. It should be based on bipartisanship, and regardless of who does it that way. More cynical people will say, well, who are his donors and stuff like that. I'm not in that political world. I'm not going to go there. He didn't schedule it for a vote, and the stated reason was because it didn't have a majority of Republican legislators in that specific house that would do it. And so I guess that's the reason.
I mean, if you ask me what's wrong with politics, Speaker Voss holding up this vote is not the first thing that comes to mind. Sometimes one guy understands that it's wrong and takes a stand, much like me. I mean, in the circles I run in, I'm on an island on this thing trying to convince people that this is not what we want, don't vote for it. But that being said, I think that if the vote is worded fairly, absolutely it should be to a vote, but it should be a coin flip and not a heavily one-sided question. So why he can do that, I don't know. That's politics for you. How many people understands politics 100%? Raise your hand if it all makes sense. Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
We could grant two things.
All right.
Okay, here's another kind of procedural question. The initiative that will appear on our ballot, does that have the effect of law, or is it just advising the legislature that this is what we want?
No, it's just advisory.
Yeah, it's absolutely advisory. Yeah.
So let me, we have a request to break this discussion down into simpler terms. So here are some simple terms for you. My house, the house I live in the city of Oshkosh, what is its assessed value based on? Do I pay more because I have a house there that I've made improvements on, or than I would if I had a vacant lot or an unoccupied house?
A property assessment has two components, and when you get your assessor's statement, it'll say what the land value is and what the improvements value is. And that does not include personal property, as John mentioned. Businesses are the only ones that pay personal property tax. John, that's another thing John and I agree on. John, I personally don't think we need personal property tax. We need to replace it with something else because we'll lose money. But personal property, we as residents don't pay for, businesses do. I think that's a problem. It should be fixed. But you get two components, and that's what you pay it on. The businesses have three components. They have that personal property tax also gets assessed. That doesn't happen in Wisconsin. It happens in other states. A lot of states, your personal property in other states includes your car. And so you pay a personal property tax when you pay a registration fee. That's why some states will have a registration fee that amounts to hundreds of dollars. I had an old Volkswagen Rabbit years ago. I paid $500 registration fee in California, and that was 1990. That's just the way, but every state's different, but the land and the improvements are usually the two components.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Personal property tax is why I bought a $26,000 pizza oven instead of a $58,000 pizza oven, because I got to pay tax on that every year. But the way the house is, it doesn't matter if it's vacant or not. If a $200,000 house should be assessed as a $200,000 house. If you winter in Florida, you shouldn't get a 20% reduction in your assessment. If the house is vacant, you shouldn't get a reduction in the assessment. A $200,000 house should be assessed as a $200,000 house. And that's the argument that I have with the dark store. If you want it in simpler terms, I don't think that a building, just because it's vacant, a business in there, should be assessed any less. And in fact, I don't think it is. I mean, the Kmart's only at $48,000, but I mean, let's look at that building. That's more than I would pay for that. And I can agree, that's a little steep, but that building probably should be bulldozed. But yeah, no, it's as simple as that. Your assessment of your house has nothing to do with the income that you make. Doesn't matter what job you have. If you're a doctor, a $200,000 house shouldn't be valued at $250,000. So just should be uniform and fair across the board.
we're out of questions. But I wonder if you want to, first of all, I want to thank both of you for presenting tonight. And if you have any other final concluding words to share, this would be the good time.
Well, I'll go first since you won the coin toss, so we'll let you have the last laugh, I guess, is the way it goes. So yeah, as I said when I started, I don't expect this referendum to go in my favor at all. I expect it to be about 93%, if not higher. I would be shocked if it wasn't higher than 93% in favor of closing a dark store loophole. And hopefully, I just hope that we look at the information and that we can get a fair question out there. And just remember that city growth is based off of new construction. I mean, we want to make sure that we keep the ball rolling. And right now, the ball is rolling in Oshkosh. I mean, there's rumblings about the arena. I love the arena. I love the herd games. I think it's awesome. There's rumbling about the golf course, and that was a hard fight, and that was a tough thing to let go. And a lot of people made sacrifices for progress in this city. I mean, we're keeping Oshkosh Corporation here. We're going to have this headquarters here, and all these jobs are staying here. I think that's a good, wise thing to do. I'm happy that Lowe's decided to come and build in Oshkosh. I'm happy they gave us $2.6 million in property taxes even after we gave them $130,000 back, and we said, all right, maybe we'll chop your assessment. But they didn't get the $34 a square foot. They compromised, so I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that as we go forward, that we stop villainizing businesses, and I don't think Mark's been doing that. He's been very fair. That we make sure that we don't draw a line in the sand between commercial properties and residents, because we're all on the same team and we need each other. And hopefully this Oshkosh Corporation, the executives come in, they build a couple $1 million houses. Hopefully not in Butamore, because we don't get the taxes from that, right? So hopefully Bayshore Drive, somewhere on there, and they build some nice taxable income for us, and we can make that back. So I just want to keep the city rolling and the ball going and Oshkosh growing. And if we start saying that the businesses are evil, I wonder if we're throwing the ball in the gutter.
I just want to thank everybody. I think the purpose of this is to educate everyone. It's going to go well past this referendum, regardless of the results. John's got a pretty easy bar to say, because if it's 89% approval, he'll say, see, you didn't even get 90%.
Yeah.
But it's really about educating you to educate your legislators. And I think that was the purpose of why the county board members put it on the ballot. They wanted to send a message. And I think John and I do agree on that. Legislature, address this issue. We need to address it.
Yep.
We may not get exactly everything we want. I feel very strongly about from an equity standpoint, and John feels very strongly. He doesn't want the businesses community to get hurt, and I think we can agree on that as well. There's so much we agree on, but this is an issue of equity that I feel strongly about. The council feels strongly about, but. Let people know how you feel about this topic, because that's what this is all about. We can sit and disagree on this, and we'll be out for a cold beverage at some point in the near future. You can count on that. But that's part of good civil debate, and I really appreciate the opportunity that the library had to put this together. So thank you, and thank you for coming out.
You both demonstrated that very well tonight. Thank you, civility. So one more. And thank you for joining us.